Have you ever received one word, one letter, or one telephone call and allowed it to decide your entire state? A voice tells you something unlovely, and immediately you call it fact. You hear bad news, and you accept it as final. But I tell you, you are not a victim of what you hear. You are only a victim of what you accept as true. Tonight, I will show you a simple act of revision known as the telephone technique. When the world speaks something unlovely, you will learn to hear within yourself the words that ought to be heard. You will hear the same voice, the same call, the same person, but this time carrying the news you desire to hear. The method is simple, but it asks for discipline. When you hear something that disturbs you, do not receive it as final. Do not fight the person. Do not argue with the voice. Do not give the outer words the authority to decide your inner state. Instead, revise what you hear in the very moment it is spoken. If the voice says it cannot be done, here it is done. If it says there is no way, here the way has opened. If it says I am afraid it failed, here I am so happy it succeeded. This is not fantasy. This is the disciplined use of your inner hearing. Every word you accept inwardly becomes a seed planted in the state from which you live. And if you live from bad news inwardly, you will meet life from that state outwardly. Now let me show you how one woman proved this, not as a theory, but in an ordinary telephone call. I once told my audience of a woman who discovered this in a very practical way. She called it her telephone technique. A friend of hers desired to pass an examination to become a court reporter. But before the examination, this friend was filled with fear. She called the lady and poured out her doubts, giving 9 distinct reasons why she might fail. Now observe what this woman did. She did not agree with the fear. She did not let pity become acceptance. She did not receive the report of failure as truth. As her friend spoke through the telephone, the lady refused to let those words enter her imagination as truth. While the friend expressed doubt, the lady inwardly heard a different words. She heard the voice of her friend saying that she had passed. She heard joy instead of fear. She heard success instead of anxiety. She did not wait for the outer conversation to change before she changed the inner one. And this is the great secret. You may seem to hear one thing outwardly, while inwardly you hear what ought to be heard. You are not bound by what first reached your ears. You are bound only by what you allow to take root within you. Now let me give you the practice plainly so you may use it today. When you hear something unlovely, whether through a telephone call, a letter, a conversation, or a memory that rises within you, pause inwardly. Do not receive it as final. Keep your outer conduct natural, but do not surrender your imagination to the bilge of the world. At that very moment, change what you hear within yourself. If they say no, hear yes. If they say it failed, hear it worked. If they speak fear, hear relief. If they speak lack, hear abundance. If they speak delay, hear completion. You must be selective, as I once told my audience, like a computer receiving data. Do not allow every unlovely word to pass unchanged into acceptance. Then, when the conversation is over, go into the silence. Sit quietly. In imagination, let the telephone ring again. Feel the receiver in your hand. Hear the same person. Hear the same voice. But now hear the words as they ought to be. Hear them say, I have wonderful news. Hear them say, everything is taken care of. Hear them say, it is done. Do not make the scene long. Make it clear. Make it natural. Make it something you would truly hear if the desire were already fulfilled. Remain with it until relief comes. Not excitement forced upon the mind, but the quiet release that says, yes, that is the truth. When that relief comes, you have moved. You have left the state of bad news and entered the state of fulfilled news. And if the first conversation returns later in memory, do not argue with it. Simply remember, I have heard another word within myself, and that is the word I accept. You must understand why this works. The outer word has no power except the power you give it through acceptance. Men believe they are being honest when they accept every unlovely word. They say, I must face the facts, but what they call facts are often only shadows of a state they continue to occupy. If you hear bad news and accept it, you enter the state of one to whom bad news is true. Then your thoughts, feelings, and actions begin to move from that state. But if you revise the hearing, you change the state. The ear of imagination is just as creative as the eye. You do not only see inwardly, you hear inwardly. And what you hear in imagination, accepted as true, becomes a seed planted in consciousness. This is why you must guard your inner hearing. Do not let every complaint, every fear, every unlovely word take root within you. The world may speak one sentence, but you have the power to hear another, and the sentence you accept within becomes the one that shapes your experience. Before you sleep tonight, return to one moment from your day that disturbed your peace. Perhaps someone spoke with doubt. Perhaps you heard words that made you feel rejected, delayed, unsupported, or afraid. Perhaps the world seemed to say not yet, not possible, or not for you. Now revise it. Hear the telephone ring again. Answer it inwardly. Hear the same voice speaking differently. Let them bring you the news you wanted to hear. Let them speak relief. Let them speak success. Let them speak love. Let them speak completion. Then feel the release. Feel the quiet certainty that the matter has already changed within you. Do not chase the outer world for confirmation. Do not ask the first conversation to prove the new one immediately. You have heard another word within yourself. Remain faithful to it. For what you hear in the secret place of imagination, you will one day meet in the open places of the world. Now, let us go into the silence.